Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to another Walking Dead video. So I wanted to talk about the season 2 finale of Daryl Dixon, and I actually really wanted to focus on a scene in the finale that I found really interesting, because I do wonder if it does foreshadow Carol's death, and that is the walker scene that we saw where Carol was a walker. It was a hallucination scene, obviously, but I think the fact that, some of the backstory behind that, and yeah, just some of the stuff with the character, I do want to talk about, the idea that, could Carol die at some point in the future here in the show? By the time this whole arc is done, this era of The Walking Dead with Rick, Michonne, Maggie and Negan, Daryl and Carol, who's gonna be alive still? So yeah, I want to talk about all that here. So before going further, make sure to be a subscriber if you do want to get all my Walking Dead content like this. I will be doing my Q&A video this Wednesday, so if you do want to take part in that Q&A, definitely go and join the Discord. There's a Q&A channel there. That's where I ask for questions and whatnot, and yeah, you can post all of your questions there, and I'll get to that this Wednesday coming up. And so let's actually talk about the scene here. So obviously what happened here was Carol was hallucinating. Everybody was hallucinating in the scene, and so Carol saw herself as a walker, and it was a really amazing scene. I think it's crazy to think that that was Carol as a walker. That's one of the more shocking things I would say for The Walking Dead. Whenever they do want to get into storylines like this, where you'll see a character, turn to a walker or what have you, it's always shocking to see a character become a walker. And it's been a while since we've seen anything like that. I mean, I'm thinking back to the very last season of The Walking Dead, or the last couple of seasons. It is very rare to see a character become a walker nowadays, which is sort of unfortunate, I will say. And I mean a main character, not a background character or anything, an actual main character. And so to see Carol as a walker in the scene, it was absolutely incredible. I thought this episode overall was really great. Honestly, I think it is my favorite episode of the season. I know that most people would probably say that episode 4 was, which, I mean, I guess I do get as well. To me, there's too many pacing issues with that episode for it to be my favorite, even though a lot happens and it is an exciting episode. I think there's a lot of pacing issues in the beginning that sort of hurt the story overall, and I think that's why I would say the finale was the best one, just in terms of the pacing. And also I really think that it got into a lot of the character stories here really well, and I think that it did an amazing job of doing that. Carol having to, I guess, accept the fact that Sophia is gone. I will say the scene in general where she does see herself as a walker, I've seen a lot of people interpret the scene. To me, what it means is she's basically seeing herself. It's almost a mirror, in a sense, because maybe there isn't that much of a difference between that walker version of Carol and herself, because maybe she hasn't really been living, since Sophia's death. She's basically been a walker the entire time. She has a really hard time, I think, just sort of living life, and I think that was really an issue for her up until, I guess, this moment here. I will say I don't think a lot of this is completely over yet, and we'll talk about what I do want to talk about in terms of does this foreshadow her death and all that in a second. But what I will say is I think that the Sophia storyline was interesting this season. It did kind of come out of nowhere, and the only reason why I say that, I originally didn't think so, but it's because of how quick they ended it. I thought it would be a storyline that would still continue going into season 3 or season 4, something that would still be around for a little bit, right? But it seems like they just introduced it out of nowhere and then ended it, this season, which I wasn't really a fan of, because I'm like, wait, what? I thought Carol would still be dealing with this going into season 3, and I think that there's a better way to handle it, I would say, overall, for sure. But I still like the fact that Carol did go through this season, because I think that it just did a lot for the character, and seeing Carol as a walker was just crazy. It was honestly insane to actually see this. And so I do want to actually get into some of the backstory here. So apparently the walker, I guess, mask that was used in that scene there was actually a walker mask or whatever of Carol from season 4 of The Walking Dead. According to the episode Insider anyways, they were actually going to kill off Carol, I guess, in season 4 of The Walking Dead. And so it's really interesting, because I look at the story back then and I think, when could that have happened? When were they originally trying to kill off the character? Because I know that season was a really big season for Carol. I'm looking at very early on with Karen and David, and then Rick, basically exiled her, and then eventually she comes back, but later on she has one of the most iconic episodes, The Grove. And I'm just wondering, at what point was the character going to die? Because you look at the season 5 premiere, if she dies in season 4, she's not the one saving Rick and everyone, right? So it is really honestly insane to think that they were actually going to kill her off, considering how much of a story they gave her in season 4. And also in season 5, she had a really incredible story in the very beginning. So I'm really curious on more of the backstory there. I think they won't tell us everything entirely yet, because of the fact that these character stories are still going. So I think by the end, when all the character stories are completely over and done, and it's the very last like endgame series or whatever final episode, there might be a documentary that talks about The Walking Dead, and they might go into everything from the very beginning all the way to the very end here, right? Like going through all the spin-offs and stuff. And I think that, getting into some of the more behind the scenes stuff of like, well, we were going to do this with the character, we were going to do this with the character, that would be really, really fascinating, because I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that we don't know in terms of the writing process of like, well, we were going to do this with this character here, this character was actually supposed to survive, but we switched it last minute. Like, I really wonder how different things could have been if certain decisions weren't made, right? And so that's why I feel like when I look at this scene here, I'm wondering, like, does this predict Carol's death in the future? Because, some of these characters are going to die. Like, there's no way that Carol and Daryl, Maggie and Negan, Rick and Michonne are all going to survive. I think by the end of all of this here, something is going to happen where we are going to see at least maybe two of these characters die. And obviously it's not going to be like both Daryl and Carol or both Rick and Michonne. Like, it's going to be like one character from each of the shows, I feel like, and then maybe, two characters survive. And so an easy one obviously is, Rick dies at the very end. Like, I do think when it comes to Rick and Daryl, like, one of them is going to be gone by the end. And I don't know who it would be. I could see Daryl dying. Like, I could definitely see that. I think that it would be honestly insane to see the character gone, but I could definitely see that because he's just been fighting for so long to keep everyone alive. And, he's always helping out other people. And I think that by the end, I could just see that happening. And I originally thought differently. I thought that Rick, could die. And he still could die, but I thought that Rick was most likely going to be the one that dies. And then Daryl is saying goodbye. But we kind of already got that on The Walking Dead in season 9, right? And Daryl sort of lived however long thinking that Rick was gone. He still kind of thinks that he's gone, like he doesn't really know that he's back yet. So I think that for Rick to die again and then Daryl to be like, oh, all right, well, at least I get to say goodbye now, kind of thing. Like, I don't know how I feel about that as a story overall. So I just think that it makes sense that maybe Daryl could be the one that's gone, and it would be insane. It would be really heartbreaking for everybody. But then again, you have to look at all the other characters too, and you got to think like which characters are gonna go. And so the Walker scene, does that foreshadow Carol's death? Like, could Carol at some point in the future die and become a Walker? Like, it would be a really heartbreaking scene for Daryl as well, if you had to go through that, because I know with the Here's Negan episode, we sort of got the whole Rick and Andrea thing, I would say, back then, but it was kind of different. I think that the context to it was very, very different. It was similar, but it was different. And so I could see, in the future, if Carol did become a Walker or something like that, Daryl having a hard time, putting her down and having to just like sit there for so long and just like, basically what happens in the comic between Rick and Andrea. Like, I could see that happening there, and then Daryl just being completely destroyed about that afterwards. Like, it would be something that would be honestly insane to happen. Obviously, Carol's an original character on the show, right? But I do wonder if, that does foreshadow Carol's death at the end, because you also got to think about it in terms of, some characters just, and their potential to return in the future. Like, that's kind of why I feel like they're never going to kill off Rick and Michonne, because say this whole era ends in the next like 4 or 5 years, right? And we get the Endgame reunion in the next 4 or 5 years. I think that once that's over and they do like this next generation thing, I'm assuming they're going to, because just it makes sense. Like, franchises like The Walking Dead and other franchises out there, like, they're going to keep things going forever, right? They're always going to make new shows, always going to make new movies and whatever. So I think that if that's where they go next in terms of a next generation type show, or maybe they reboot the whole entire thing, I don't know how I'd feel about that, but maybe they do that. I think that there's always going to be that option to bring back Rick and Daryl, right? And I could see Norman Reedus wanting to return. Like, say he's been gone for like 10 years and then he comes back and he plays Daryl, but he's just much older now or something like that. Like, I could just see that with the character, and I don't know if they're ever going to want to kill off Daryl or Rick, because they're very, very popular characters. It is hard because every character obviously has some sort of amazing backstory, but the story is going to end at some point here. It's just more of, in the future, if AMC wants to bring back a character, I could see them easily being like, all right, we're going to bring back Rick Grimes, or we're going to bring back Daryl, right? Because they're like the most popular characters. And so I could see that. I could definitely see that. And that's why when you look at all of them, I feel like, Carol, it makes the most sense to probably die. Honestly, my picks would be like Carol, Maggie or like even Daryl potentially, even though I know that that's sort of going against what I just said. And so I don't know if this is foreshadowing Carol's death, but the fact that they actually already sort of want to write off the character years ago, I feel like it's something that is there still. Like, if they do want to kill off the character at some point, they always can. I think that if it did happen, again, it would be like the ending of the series, because I just don't think you could kill off Carol like right now, say in season 4 or 5 of Daryl Dixon, and then have a whole endgame series without Carol. Like, that would be really disappointing. So I think that she would be like the big death of everything. Maybe that happens at the very end, right? Like, I think that'd be absolutely insane, but we'll have to wait and see. Honestly, I think that Walker scene was just honestly incredible, and it's amazing to see, because you do kind of wonder, like, is that foreshadowing something? I don't know, but definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video. Do you think the Walker scene in the very last episode of The Walking Dead Daryl Dixon Season 2 was foreshadowing Carol's death at all? Or do you think it was just a really cool moment because they obviously, you know, they probably were going to kill off the character, I guess, in Season 4? I really want to know how they were going to do that. Like, what was the storyline back then? Was the character just going to die from, like, the sickness, I guess, that was happening at the point? Or was it going to happen, you know, later on, I guess, versus the governor? Maybe it was during the Grove. Like, maybe she was going to die during that episode. I'm really curious. So yeah, I'm gonna leave it here though. Definitely post all your thoughts down below. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.